A very good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear? If you can hear me, just raise your hands up. Fantastic, great energy. My name is Bright Obeng, and today I'm going to talk to you about how a traditional CFO can move from being a great traditional CFO to an embedded CFO. I'm sorry, my clicker is not working, so I will need to stay quite close to my screen. A few house rules, as I was told by the organization. Great job, guys. Well done. Please, if you have any question during this talk, just scan this code. In the course of the talk, you can ask questions. And I have been told that someone from the team is going to help us with that. Maybe a mic or something that I can. I'm sorry, I cannot hear myself. Okay, let's get started. So first of all, this is the last talk before the lunch. Just raise your left hand if you say, Bright, just get this done as quick as possible so that we can have lunch. And raise your right hand if you say, okay, I can give you some energy and then we can have lunch. Okay, I think I can work with this. Thank you so much. Great. This is going to be a conversation. Obviously, I have some things to say, but after that, I would like to have a conversation with you about this topic that really, really means a lot to me. But let me start by telling you who I am. My name is Bright Obeng, as I said. I am the host of one of the biggest CFO podcasts in Belgium. It is called the CFO Podcast. And we just announced quite a big collaboration with Roularta. Our podcast is going to be featured on national television in Belgium. But actually, my story started 43 years ago because I was born in Ghana in West Africa. And I am actually coming from a family where finance was pretty much everything that we did. So first of all, it's important for you to know that I have a finance background. I have a master's degree in finance, worked at Deloitte. In all fairness, it was a great experience, but I fell in love with FP&A, and then I transitioned into different FP&A roles in Belgium and outside of Belgium, and then ended with a role at Roku, where I was part of a management team managing more than 200 million in revenue. As being the host of the podcast, I've had the privilege of not only interviewing amazing minds within the finance space in Belgium, but also I am an executive search headhunter that places CFOs in Belgium through my company Key Figures. And I have interviewed more than 3,000 CFOs. And this talk is pretty much a conversation in my head that you will hear about what I think a great CFO is, why a CFO needs to transition to become an embedded CFO. But maybe a short thing about me, as I said, coming from a family of finance. My father was a finance professional. My grandfather from the father side was one of the founding members of the Accountancy Institute in Ghana. My brother, who is also a CFO, he turned CFO at the age of 27. So when I was studying, I pretty much didn't have a lot of option because everyone was looking at me like, hey, you're going to do finance, right? So that is actually what I did. And in my spare time, I have 2 kids married. I enjoy watching stand-up comedy and I play the drums, but that is not for your ears, that is only for me and to frustrate my family. But let me start this talk by telling you this. I have some really, really bad news. But the good thing is, I also came with good news. And the bad news is, the office of the CFO is dying. The office of the CFO is dying because CFOs and the office of the CFO are pretty much running the horses faster when others are developing the first cars. And that is a problem. Because when you start running finance teams as race horses, inevitably, you're going to lose them. Not only are you going to lose them because they get sick or whatever, but you lose them because they are not able to innovate themselves to become great finance leaders. But what are the other people building? They are building the new technology, and obviously we are here in a company that is building exactly one of these technologies to help CFOs and their team transition to become embedded teams. But what is actually the real problem here? Why do I believe this talk is worth your time? The problem is the business is screaming for finance business partners, but finance has no time. Finance is so busy working on the closing, on the compliance, on the reporting, and the forecasting, and making sure that whatever is agreed is done, but the business just needs guidance. A quick question. Who is here a CFO? Just raise your hand if you're a CFO. Great. Who is not a CFO but works within finance? Fantastic. Do you spend too much time on reporting? Just raise your hand. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. And the key question is, we have the other side of the coin. If you manage as a CFO to finally get everything sorted out, the things are aligned, and you have time to be a business partner, they tell you, no, don't come to our kitchen, just deliver us the figures, and we will be fine. I think that's a dilemma. And that is why both sides of the equation need a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is what I would like to call the rise of embedded finance. But before we talk about embedded finance, we need to talk about what is a traditional CFO and what is a great traditional CFO. A traditional CFO is the CFO, he or she is fantastic in making sure that the compliance runs effortlessly. Maybe it's even automated. They have fantastic reporting. Whatever you need, they have a reporting for. And the forecasting process, with a bit of a shadow dancing and a bit of fights, we still get a fantastic reporting through. But the business needs more than reporting. Because just sending the reporting and even challenging them is not what they do. The business needs guidance. The business just wants to know, are we doing well? Is whatever the activity levels that we're doing, is it actually trending towards what we want to do in our strategic plan? And that leads me to the definition of what an embedded CFO is. For me, after speaking to thousands of CFOs, the number one thing is you need to understand very, very well what your value chain is. It doesn't matter if you're a SaaS company, you're a production company, you're an insurance business, or you're a consulting business. The CFO needs to be able to easily map, understand, sell, and convince people what your value chain is. This can be very, very controversial, but I deeply believe that the CFO needs to know the customers better than the sales team. And last but not least, you need to act as a co-pilot. A co-pilot doesn't mean you run the show, it means you can run the show next to being a co-pilot. But it takes two to tango. And I chose this image to make it very, very clear that the single most important person that can facilitate the CFO to become an embedded CFO is a CEO. I have heard so many times from the CFOs that I help to transition that they have these amazing ideas, they have these amazing things that they want to do, but the CEO that they work for, they are just looking for a bookkeeper. This just makes me sad. So the CEO or the board are really an important stakeholder in making sure that this can happen, because they make sure that the CFO gets the space, the resources, and the time to actually implement what it means to become an embedded CFO. But most CFOs are not embedded. It's not because they don't want to, it's because they are in an environment what probably doesn't allow them to shine as an embedded CFO. So the question is, what do you think is the key condition to become embedded? Do you think is the environment? Please raise your right hand. Or do you think it's actually just the CEO? That's an interesting thing to say. Thanks for your honesty. But I even have worse news. Most CEOs don't even realize that they are actually sabotaging their own CFOs. Because when you say that this is a core business discussion, CFO, please just move on with what you're doing, you're actually sabotaging the CFO. If you say the marketing budget is something that is reserved for the CEO to only decide on, you're sabotaging the CEO. If you say, please, Mr. or Mrs. CFO, do not visit too many clients as a CFO, you're sabotaging your CFO to become embedded. And for me, to become a really embedded CFO, you need to do 3 shifts, 3 important shifts that you need to do. The first shift that you need to know is you need to master the art of turning numbers to narratives. The thing is, producing reports, how technically complex they are, it doesn't change anything. I actually did a podcast with one of the partners of Delaware, and he said one of the first things a CFO should do when they transition the first 100 days, just stop sending reports. And if nobody answers or asks you, where's my report? That is one of the fastest way to kill this report. I kid you not, you can go back and listen to that one. So I completely believe that when you can rationalize that, you can use more energy to turn these numbers into action. And what is an action? An action is when you send something out, you get a call on email, can we have a conversation? Because what you've just shown me needs an action. I want to do something. Can you help me? Can you help me strategize this? This is exactly what you need. The second shift, you need to move from just being the partner who challenges, but you need to be a driver. Driver who can take the wheel. Doesn't mean you need to become the salesperson or the marketing person or the engineer, but you need to be able to take the wheel with them to make sure they can initiate the change that you want. And trust me, they need more of you than you think. And the third shift is focus. I have heard and seen this time and time again. If you are reporting too much, you don't know your business. I fundamentally believe that the best CFOs are the ones that pivot depending on where the business is, what the strategic initiatives are, and is pushing their teams to focus on just a few things to keep the focus on. Because if they are getting a huge deck of 30 pages, come on, no one is reading it. But what are the key things they want to take out? People can only take 3 actions from that. So making sure that that happens is extremely important. But I would like to start by talking about the elephant in the room. A lot of CFOs join companies and they are operating outdated systems. And they are not able to get the budget, they are not able to get the support from the board to implement systems that will really help the teams to grow. And I think that is one of the key things that you need to become an embedded CFO. If you're running an outdated system and your team is just a reporting factory, there is no way, even with the support of the CEO, that you can become an embedded CFO. It's also extremely important to look at what you really need to focus on when you become embedded. Embedded means business focus after all. Make sure that whatever you need to do when it comes to compliance, when it comes to reporting, yes, that is the basic, that is the foundation, let's get it done. But you need to transition into focusing 100% on the business. Being a co-pilot doesn't mean you are just part of the team and helping them strategize the business. Being a co-pilot means you're digging deep, sometimes even deeper than them, to preempt them on things that are coming, to force them to think outside the box, but most importantly, to think as if every key decision is a business case that needs to be built. But execution is everything. It's so easy to say you have become an embedded CFO, but an embedded CFO is what you become when you are executing on a daily level, making sure that the business and their needs are met by engaging with them, engaging much, much, much more with them than you used to do. And the first thing you have to do, I always say, is please step out of your office and start having conversation with the business. But let me end with this. If you're a CFO or you know a CFO, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Do you want to be known as a fantastic traditional CFO, or do you want to become an embedded CFO that really drives the business? Thank you very much for listening. Maybe before we jump into the Q&A, if you'd like to connect with me, please do so. I'm more than happy to talk to you about this specific topic in detail. I'm right on time, I can see. So if there are a few questions we can take, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to dig into it.
Yes, Bright. Thank you for the amazing presentation.
There is no sound from me.
But I can hear you.
You can, okay,
yes.
That's fine.
Bright, thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
So we have a few questions here.
Yeah.
So let's start. What is important in the collaboration between a CFO and a sales director, and how can the parties support each other?
Okay. So the CFO and the sales director, as far as I'm concerned, they have one of the most opposing interests, I would say. The sales director is there to push the business, make the sale, especially if they are bonus on volumes and they're not a margin on all things below margin. They typically have an opposing side. What I believe that needs to be done is that the CFO needs to really understand what I call customer segmentation. They need to really understand, why are we targeting these kind of businesses and why not the other ones? The second thing is, the CFO needs to understand the total value chain that the commercial director or VP of sales is trying to understand, because sometimes there are things happening in those value chains that the sales director is not aware of. The CFO can dig a bit deeper, look at other companies, their figures, because one of the key things that you see, especially in B2B environment, is that the sales brings in a huge client, but finance said, are we sure we want to do business with this company? So it is extremely important to be fully aligned, but the CFO needs to make sure that he or she understands the value chain of the client That's extremely important.
Thank you.
Sure.
What's the difference between a business-driven CFO and an embedded CFO?
Great. It's a great question. I don't know who asked that. So for me, there are three types. You have the traditional CFO that typically started off being an excellent accountant, maybe a CPA, and then you move to a business, finance business partner that is actually coming closer and closer to the business, being extremely savvy in forecasting, in aligning with it, in challenging them. For me, the embedded CFO is the person that actually embeds themselves in the business, and actually, if one of the best examples that I've seen is that the finance team sits in a cubicle around the sales team, that they are actually hearing, they are engaging, they are understanding what the struggles are, because if there is a huge credit note that comes in for a deal of a previous month, they actually understand. So for me, that is the biggest difference. Being embedded is sometimes being physically embedded, but obviously being embedded is doing all the things that I just said.
Yes, thank you. How can other C-level help CFOs integrate their department?
Fantastic. I think other C-levels can help the CFO office by making sure that they see the office of the CFO not just like a reporting or a compliance partner, but actually a real business partner to what they do. That they can use the finance office to amplify and make sure that whatever they are doing, they are being guided in the right direction. That is the best way to do it.
Yeah. And how can they amplify that?
Well, you can amplify that by getting closer to them. So finance needs to get closer from moving from traditional being a business partner to embedded, but the other teams can do exactly the same. Show them your conversion rate. Show them your pipeline. Let them know where are we losing client. If you're a SaaS company, let them understand what the churn is, because the churn determines the growth speed of a SaaS company. This is what the other teams need to make sure that the finance team get more and more and more knowledge of their business.
Great. The next question is how to persuade the CEO to support the CFO but still give him freedom for development of the business.
Yes. So in a typical, I'll answer that question, but I need to say something else. Yeah. In a typical setup, Belgium is an SME market. In a typical setup, you have the CEO who is typically a technical person or a founder or a salesperson, and then you bring the CFO in who typically runs all the other things. So the best way to have the CEO getting the support is to have the CEO actually relinquish a bit of his or her power to give the CFO the power to actually dig a bit deeper in the department that he used to be, I would say, the boss or the person who controls, because that is what is going to allow the CFO to really get closer to the business, because the closer the CFO is to the business, the faster they can become embedded into the business.
Yes. The next one is, if the CFO becomes operational as well, what will the COO do? What will be the role of the COO if the CFO becomes operational?
Being embedded doesn't mean the CFO becomes operational. It doesn't mean the CFO becomes the CEO, even though I see a lot of CFOs transitioning into the role of COO before they become CEO. The role of a COO is obviously very different depending on the value chain, but the role of a CFO, when there is a COO, is to add the analytics, the guidance, whatever is needed for the COO to run the operations of the business. It is not to have the CFO take it over. Even though I think the COO is probably one of the biggest fans of the CFO in a typical setup.
When looking for a new role as a CFO,
yes,
what are the red flags that CFO should pay attention to when it comes to taking on a new role?
So I have 2 minutes. I'll take it. Yeah. Is this the last question? Because
no, it's not the last
then
question.
I'll make it quick. For me, you need to ask 3 questions to the CEO all the time. First of all, how do you fight? What was the last fight you had with a CFO? How was it resolved? That's number 1. If the CEO says we don't fight, that's a red flag. He or she is lying. If the CEO says we always agree, that's a red flag, because that means he or she is choosing. But what you want to hear is that we actually didn't speak for 2 days. We had a lunch somewhere, and then we came to an agreement. That is what normal human relationship is. That's number 1. Number 2, you need to ask the CFO, what is the biggest project that the previous CFO did? If they cannot answer, it means that the CFO is not getting enough investment to invest in the office of the CFO. And last but not least, you need to ask the CEO, how does the whole executive team decide? If there is no clear answer, one person is deciding. That's the CEO.
Okay. Great. Last question. What have you learned from speaking with 3,000 CFOs?
Oh, that's a good one. The biggest lesson I've learned is, why do they leave companies? And I can bring it to 2 things. They leave because they become misaligned. I sometimes call it, you fall out of love, because normally you fall in love with the company, the products, the team, and everything, and you fall out of love. But to make it more analytical, they become misaligned because they came for a promise A, and down the line it became B, and it was not clear why it became B, and they become misaligned and they leave. And the last thing is, they are not being triggered. They have been left with their team at a corner, and no one is listening to them, because they are stuck actually between the traditional CFO and the embedded, and they cannot transition. And they need the CFO, the CEO rather, to see it, feel it, and say, look, let me push you to the right side. And if that happens, they all stay. But it doesn't happen enough.
Right. We have reached our time. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much for your time.